Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Shorten Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.
From Mansers on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge, we're out to lunch with editor of the Baton Rouge Business Report, Stephanie Regal. It's business, Baton Rouge style.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Regal. Welcome to Out to Lunch. In May 2013, New Orleans businessman John Georges bought Baton Rouge's beloved family-owned newspaper, The Advocate. At a time when media companies around the country were selling off their dailies or going exclusively digital, Georges was a salmon swimming upstream. In the years since, he has grown the paper in Lafayette and New Orleans and acquired the New Orleans Times Picayune, as well as several community newspapers, actually 13, and New Orleans alternative weekly Gambit. What's the business model at this growing media company that appears to be defying the odds, and what is it like to be a newspaper executive in an age of digital disruption? Joining me to discuss this today is The Advocate's publisher, Judy Terzotis. Judy is a veteran media executive who grew up in Tennessee and spent 25 years of her career at Gannett, where she spent 4 years as president of Gannett, Louisiana, and 2 years as president of its Gulf region, which includes 5 papers in Louisiana, 2 in Mississippi, and 1 in Alabama, so she knows the business. She joined Georges Media in January 2018. Since that, she's grown the staff and circulation of The Advocate of Acadiana and played a key role in combining the New Orleans Advocate, the Times Picayune, and NOLA.com after Georges acquired the venerable TP and its online platform in 2019. Judy, it is such a pleasure to have you with me today on Out to Lunch, and I'm really excited about this conversation because, as you can imagine, it's near and dear to my heart. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here.
So as I mentioned, The Advocate, of course, until 2013, which really doesn't seem like that long ago, was locally owned by the Manship family. And then John Georges acquired it, has grown it, and expanded most recently with the acquisition of the Times Picayune and 13 weeklies around the region along the way, as you mentioned to me. That's just crazy. How did you become part of this media empire?
And I was so fortunate in how things work out. I mean, I came to Louisiana through Gannett, and 25 years, the company is very good to me, but Louisiana has been very special. My son went to LSU. We were actually in Nashville, and he looked at every SEC school, and he said, I want to drive down to LSU, and I said, great. My husband said, I'm not driving 9.5 hours. He's never going to go to LSU. Long story short, he fell in love with LSU and the culture, and so I had been acquainted with the state and knew The Advocate, obviously, because it was the state's largest newspaper.
Right.
So I had some history even before I came to Louisiana. But when I did in 2013, about the same time that he purchased The Advocate, I was in several social events and got to meet John. And over the course of a few years, we just, he kind of would twist he called me his frenemy,
right.
or that Greek lady in Lafayette, and said, I hope someday we can talk about you joining my company. And, timing worked out really, really well. Gannett was going through a reimagining of the top structure, and I was a regional president. There were 12 of us. And
wow.
About a year before, about 2012, we were brought to corporate, and they said, in about a year, your job is going away. So
It was nice they gave you a little warning at least, right?
It was lovely. No, but seriously, it helped me, also make sure I was placing my staff and putting them in good positions as they were restructuring. But I ran into John and to Dan Shea, the former publisher, and they said, really, we're about ready to make a move on replacing Dan because he wants to retire. So very fortunate to get to know him and to be able to come on to the organization.
Right. And so, but John and his wife, Dathel Coleman Georges, are the owners. They're the money behind the paper. And you as publisher, you run it.
Correct.
And you run all 3 of the major advocates and the Times Picayune. It's really now one joint paper.
Correct.
And so tell me about the content sharing and sort of the, are these individual newspapers, each sort of a regional version with a lot of the same stories that run throughout, and then individual ones tailored for the market?
Yeah, great question. Because I think really when the Manships first went into New Orleans, it was, that entry into the market, it was really Baton Rouge paper, as you say, just with an addition, maybe a section that was localized to New Orleans. And all of these communities are very proud.
Yes.
They want their own local content. And so quickly when, after the purchase, John and Dan said, no, if we're going to be in a community, they deserve their own publication. So bigger, broader topics like state politics, LSU, things that people care about across the state, absolutely those stories are shared. But when it comes to local news reporting, unless it's an anomaly like the Hard Rock, unfortunate collapse, then those stories are just for those markets. And so we have staffs in each of them. They each have their own managing editor, and it's important to us to really reflect the communities. So they it's an anomaly in this business to see how robust the products are that are very, very targeted to the local audiences.
So explain how this business model works, because you're not, I guess you are behind a paywall now, and that helps a little bit. I suppose that helps maybe a lot.
Well, we're a little bit behind the eight ball when it comes to this industry going on, asking to be paid for content online. So we put a group together really shortly after I joined the Advocate just to look at what model paywall would we want to go to, and really sought out, Washington Post, Minneapolis, some of the real leaders, Sacramento. And what the model we put up, it's a propensity model. So it's not your traditional one-size-fits-all where you get 15 articles a month. And then if you hit that 16th, you're served up, a paywall. Ours is about propensity to subscribe. So the more news that you really consume, then you're going to have a higher likelihood that we're going to ask you to pay for it. So we really believe that our journalists deserve to be paid for their content, and just like they do in print. And so it's part of our business model. But we're in infancy. We launched last April, so we're not even at a year. So we have about 6,500 digital only subscribers. And to give you an idea, this is a stat I use. Doesn't mean it's the end all be all. But to pay for all of our newsroom salaries, what would that number need to be? So over a course of time, we would need to get to 66,000 digital-only subscribers. That would pay for the salaries of all of our news staff.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've got a long way to go, but we're doing it in a way that's very thoughtful. It's very sophisticated. We use Mather Economics and Blue Conic, two of the leaders in this space, to help us navigate.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, you look at the paper, the printed edition of the paper, just like all papers, and they get smaller and smaller because everybody's going online. So how do you do it in an era of decreasing print circulation, and how do we measure circulation really so that you can sell ads? Well, because it doesn't really show up, on the old traditional models like the Alliance for Audited Media that measures print circulation. It shows numbers going down, and yet you all keep growing. How does it work?
Part of our growth has quite frankly been through acquisition. That's helped our numbers, but also it's about the investment that John and Dathel are making. As you reference, the page count, it's a robust print product, and it's driven by a high number of journalists, and we have 125 journalists across 3 markets. We have more journalists in our organization than they do in Nashville, Tennessee, in Des Moines, Iowa. So you let that sit a minute. And those are newsrooms. I used to be at the Tennessean. The newsrooms of 400 at one point.
Wow.
And so to see the investment on the amount of content that we're generating, local content, along with the number of pages. Monday and Tuesday we have 4-page section newspapers. There's not a daily of any size in the country that isn't on a 2-section. So that helps our circulation retain. So it's about, that customer satisfaction, right? And if we disappoint our subscribers, then if that content isn't good enough, they're going to find other ways to consume local news. So that's helped our trends tremendously. And I just really believe that it's that chicken and the egg. It's that investment that they're making.
Sure.
It's helping us have, our retention rate be at a very high, well above average.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then how ads online don't generate as much revenue for the company as ads in the print product do or did. So how do you make up that difference financially and I know it's hard selling, and even if you sell a ton of ads online.
That's right. And we're about 25% of our total ad revenue is digital ad revenue. Really, the Gannett's of the world, the McClatchys of the world, that's more like 40%, but they're giving it at the expense of print revenue. So when you look at the total, I mean, we're growing revenue year over year as a total, which is, again, bucking the trend substantially. But we've added other lines of revenue, and events is one of those. So last year, as an example, we did a big prep event, brought Drew Brees in, 1,300 attendees at LaBerge, and through sponsor revenue and ticket revenue generated a nice amount of profit. So those kind of events, and some are small and some are large, is a new revenue stream. Well, we're really trying to diversify and get more customers to spend up, not at the expense of print, because print still works in the South. I mean, if the readership's there, you have the right demos on print, advertisers get results. So it's balancing and not taking out of one pocket to put into the other.
And you say in the South. Is it because in the South people are more traditional and they just cling to doing things the old way?
I think so. I mean, really, in my tenure with Gannett, with Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama, we saw very similar readership trends, that people still like print, and it's not just boomers. It's actually, it can skew a little bit younger. So, it's at some point print will diminish and at a fast rate. But right now there's still an appetite, and it's still, it's still a value for customers.
So that's interesting, because I wanted to ask you about the new product lines and services that you all are, because it's a different way of generating revenue. And the Breeze example is a great one. What else are y'all doing, here in Baton Rouge, and any new sort of publications or training things, or like the Business Expo that y'all had? I don't know if that was a paid event.
It was, yes. And I try, that my background, I came from Gannett, and in Gannett I helped lead the event division also as part of my job. So I was lucky to have that exposure, and really just found if you can bring either content expertise or a kind of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, something very special. And people are willing to, first of all, take their time, because people are so busy, and go attend an event, but they're also willing to pay. And so we have the Economic Summit. We have also panelists in New Orleans recently, all women chefs. And so we had an evening,
that's great.
And it was just moderated. We had about 200 people. So we're trying to, again, find that niche. Also merchandise. I was mentioning earlier, the LSU, thank goodness, the national championship. Right. We had a store online, and it was selling front pages here and there and photos, but we got really serious. And at the start of the season, all of our front pages with sports, we started making posters. And so
that's so great.
And of course,
so smart.
As they were winning, people were buying more and more posters. And literally, if you went into our office right now, it looks like a little manufacturing, because we have so many posters and so many orders. We're right now running about trying to fulfill 2,000 a week, 2,000 posters going out in the mail. So, and then we've added T-shirts and we've added mugs. So, I mean, it's just taking an opportunity and saying, okay, what can we make a difference? What will people care about? Also, our building is a beautiful facility right off I-10. John thoughtfully built it too big, because he wanted to be able to say, that's Class A office space. I want to be able to have a tenant in there. So we have Hajoka, which does plumbing and supplies. It's their HR department and their finance department are on our second floor. So just a smart way.
And are y'all on 1 and...
We're on 1 and 3.
1 and 3, and they're on 2.
Yes. So those are just some different things to help the business model be stable.
So smart, right? Yeah. Really bringing that business perspective to what had been just a traditional media company. So how has acquiring the smaller community newspapers around the region, and maybe you want to mention some of them, how has that helped? Is it economies of scale kind of thing? And are you able to cross-sell advertising? Like if you buy something for the Advocate, do you also maybe get a little bit in the St. Francisville or the Zachary paper?
Exactly. Now, it's all about that efficiency of scale. I mean, there's one printing press. There's one, big finance, IT, HR. It's all headquartered in Baton Rouge. And so we have about 300 employees in Baton Rouge, about 90 in New Orleans, and about 28 in Acadiana, but New Orleans and Acadiana are predominantly advertising, marketing, and editorial. So we have those teams, but so the contiguous footprint for any print publication is important to us, because although Shreveport has almost become a news desert because of the lack of local reporting up in Shreveport, and we've been lobbied, come by the Shreveport Times or start something.
Really?
It doesn't make sense for us because it's over 3 hours away in trucking every night if we did a print publication. So we think of those markets as digital opportunities for us with local digital news and those digital only subscribers. But being able to take that, and we cross-sell, but you'll find a lot of the smaller, those what I would call community newspapers, they're there for those very small businesses who can't afford and really aren't going to pull past maybe a 10-mile radius of their store. They need a local outlet.
Right.
So there is crossing on the bigger kind of national, the Targets of the world. The smaller advertisers have an outlet through the community publications.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Stephanie Riegel. I'm talking with Judy Terzotis of The Advocate. We'll be right back after this very short break. You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Stephanie Riegel. I'm talking to Judy Terzotis of The Advocate. You raised such a good point about a news desert, as you called it up in Shreveport. And it's so sad because it seems like in this era of fake news and so much hostility, institutional hostility on so many levels towards the media, and yet more need for boots on the ground local reporting than ever. And I certainly see it at the Business Report, the same people that are railing against the media and the liberal this and that call me up and say, please look into this or please look into that.
Right.
People want the media to perform its traditional duty of shining a light on what's going on. And so speak to that a little bit, and the need for it, and especially what it means to be losing that in some of these other communities.
Right. I mean, it is. It's, as the traditional media companies, the larger chains, when they look for efficiency, they've cut for years and years and years, and unfortunately it comes down now to people and cutting resources. And so the numbers of journalists that you saw 5 years ago, even 3 years ago in Shreveport, is a shadow of what it is today. And to us, it's like, how do we help those areas in terms of local reporting, but from a business sense, what makes profit sense for us as well. So, but we look at the state as a whole as really certainly and beyond, as our digital opportunity. And, known for LSU coverage and state politics. So for us to be able to have some of those topics and then layer on is something that we're looking at in terms of expansion.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's encouraging. So it doesn't really make sense to look at this point moving north or wherever physically, but digitally. Right? And when we talk about fake news, what is The Advocate doing in terms of policy and coverage to combat, all of the problems that have arisen with that? Has it changed in terms of just the kind of maybe disclaimers, or maybe the way you address any errors and correcting them right away online, or anything that your reporters in the field are doing differently to try to, like I said, combat that perception, about fake news?
Yeah, I think internally, in terms of just how we write stories and how they're sourced and the number of reads they had before they're published, I think that goes back to the integrity that the manship's built into that newsroom, and we continue to carry on. That hasn't changed. I will tell you that, what social media has done in terms of immediacy, wanting to get out that something has happened before you get all of the details and you get it sourced. That's where it's gotten trickier, and we just have to really caution. I mean, the sad with Kobe's passing, you saw that several national news organizations had put out erroneous information about who was on the flight. And so that immediacy and wanting to, it's this business wants to be first, And I respect that, but I would rather not be first and be right. And so it's been built into that newsroom for, let's be cautious, let's be correct, let's be accurate, let's be fair and balanced. So that part hasn't changed. But I do think, with the reporting and we look at digital metrics on how many page views reporters are getting, how many conversions in terms of digital subscribers. So there's this pressure now on the reporters and our news generators that they didn't have a few years ago, that is driven by digital and social media. So that's the part we have to be very careful,
right?
Because you can, out of that desire to say, I want to be first, or, hey, this is my job to get this up on social, to not have sourced it and really made sure that the content was accurate.
Yeah, I mean, social media has changed the whole traditional media business so much.
Right.
Do you think for the better or the worse?
That's a good question. A little bit of both. I mean, I do. I feel like what I've encountered is consumers are coming back to what I'll call more traditional news outlets because they know that they can trust them.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you know this? That, I mean, these are trends and that you all have seen. People are coming back.
Yes, Pointer they've written a number of things about that. And it's not. You still have all the doubters and you have the misinformation, and people love to just use that term almost as a weapon, right? Fake news when they see a reporter, but overall, I think for our business, that's not something we're attacked with, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of just the tradition of making sure that we're fair and balanced.
Mm-hmm. But some of the positive things about social media, if there are any.
Oh, absolutely. You can share so readily, right? I mean, it just gives you that ability to take that content. I'll tell you this funny little story. This morning, we were just looking at content that was just what we'll call preferred or gets a lot of traffic that you wouldn't expect. Anytime we write anything about a cruise, seriously about cruising.
Really?
It immediately gets traction and it's shared at a high rate. And so, I mean, it was so interesting. So right? I was like, what else do we have that does? But it's surprising. Mm-hmm. So you have the opportunity to take that content that's special and unique, and it gets a much broader reach than it did in the past.
And I guess it's a fine line, particularly with the digital product, when we're talking about clickbait, and sort of where do you draw the line between including content that is going to be of interest to your reader based on the metrics and the prior research and the data, and something that is just salacious or really not, right? I mean...
Right. You do. You just and I find that we're very conservative, so we don't do a lot of clickbait. There's the story about the camel that that
right?
sat on the lady. We all know that story. Well, that was an interesting story, and we rode the heck out of that. I mean, we got great traffic, and it was just an anomaly.
Somebody from the Advocate was telling me that was like the most tremendously read story all year.
Yeah, and then it gets picked up. It gets picked up and across the country, and then you get even more credit. But
right.
We try not. I mean, there's a lot of news organizations that use those headlines that are clickbait, and it just doesn't fit into our mission.
Mm-hmm. And then the ads that you'll see down on the bottom, like sometimes I'll be looking and the next thing I know, I'm checking out what Jan Brady looks like now and what happened to Barbie Benton.
Absolutely.
And I wasted a half an hour and this is terrible. But do these just come from like services that y'all buy and then y'all get a cut of it or what?
It is. It's through programmatic advertising. So it is. It's, those, and they're further down the scroll.
Thankfully,
so,
yes.
So... But to your point, they're highly read. So there still is that kind of entertainment value that people still want,
How do we attract younger readers? I mean, we have young adult children, both of us. And I mean, I'm just amazed at how mine, as educated as they are and they think they're informed about the world, but they don't have the habit. And maybe it's because that paper doesn't come to their house. Or their apartments, of reading the daily news. They'll see what they see on social media, but that's not the same as it was when I was 23.
That's right.
And I was starting to read the newspaper every day by then.
Exactly.
What do we do? What are you all doing to educate them and attract them as regular readers that will grow up, or continue to grow reading the
I mean,
newspaper?
it is a struggle across the industry, without a doubt. It's like we want those younger readers and want them to have a lifelong habit. And so anytime we can have an interaction with them that's outside of traditional news and bringing them together in an event, and this is from my old Gannett days, so I would say this is not something we've done here, but I will tell you it's a great example. We did an event called Unfiltered in Lafayette, and what it was during the city election, and we had the 705, the Young Professional organization there, supply 5 or 6 people that got up on stage at this very cool venue and told, really what was their vision for Lafayette. And in between those little stump speeches, we had a local band play. And of course, there's beer and there's, wine. We invited all the politicians, but they weren't allowed to talk.
Nice.
So
really nice.
Of course
they had to listen.
They had to listen, and then afterwards, obviously, they had the opportunity to interact with the young professional group. So that's just an example of a way to say, okay, this is who we are. They thought about the Daily Advertiser in that instant in a different way than they would have just this old print product. So trying to find tactics that you can expose your brand and what you have to offer that gets the hook is, and then through digital. I mean, our digital subscriptions as an industry, I think that's where our hope is.
Right.
It's like that's how we're going to get the younger generation. And, that's back to your question about social media. That helps because then you're spreading your content across, you can be very targeted there across demos.
Are y'all looking at doing something like that, for instance, with Forum 35 here?
Absolutely. Those kind of events are right up our alley.
So, like when I think back on how much the industry has changed in our, in the time that we've been in the business, it's just phenomenal. I know everybody says that about the disruption economy, but it's a whole different business today. Do you think that the media today, the daily print media, is better off or worse?
I think it's actually better off just in terms of the technological advancements and being able to pull data in that we really, it was much more cumbersome to pull data. I mean, it was a physical task as opposed to a click of a button. And so I think it gives us a little bit more depth in terms of expertise because we can do, kind of that planning and preparing before either, before a news story or before a sales call that we weren't able to do. And so we can talk about trends and we can help businesses like connect the dots, but also readers do the same thing.
And just the information,
that
you can use when you're researching a story, for instance, just boom, or to get in touch with somebody.
Exactly.
It's so easy today, and we used to have to look it all up in big, thick volumes or go to the public library and research it. What is the future for the Advocate? Can you speak to what John Georges has planned? Say for the next 3 to 5 years, what is his business model? Does he keep growing? Does he have an exit strategy at some point?
Well, he definitely does it. Exit is not in the cards. When I interviewed with John, I asked him, I said, why did you buy the Advocate? Because, I was like, okay, I want to really understand he's invested for the right reason. And, his answer, and he says this over and over, is, first of all, when he buys a business at his age, he wants it to pique his curiosity. He wants to learn something, but he really wants to have a legacy for his family in South Louisiana. And so that's really where his heart is. And, it's not his mainline business by any stretch of the imagination, but he's also been intrigued by the opportunity to buck trends and to grow. So we're looking at some small acquisitions right now, nothing of the scale of the Times Picayune and NOLA, but he likes the contiguous footprint across I-10. In fact, he has said in many Rotary speeches that he would like to own between Lake Charles and the Mississippi line. So
and is the American Press a Gannett newspaper also?
No, it's not. It's family owned.
Right. It's still family owned.
It's still family owned.
So there's a possibility there.
And then also looking at diverse, kind of complementary business lines. Do we buy some other business that we bolt on? But he is one of those owners that if it's the right fit, he's willing to talk about it, and that's been really fun being in my job.
Is he one of those business owners that is very hands on, or does he let you run things? Do you all converse and meet regularly, or how does that work?
In fact, we don't meet regularly. Every time I tried to give him a report my first year, he would go corporate. And that's just not how he rolls. But he just wants to be informed. No, he's not hands-on day to day by any stretch of the imagination. It's never told us what to write, what not to write. But what I do appreciate about John, he can open any door in Louisiana. So if we need to have a conversation or we want to go talk to an advertiser, he doesn't go with us, but he can make a phone call and open a door. But he likes just to be informed, but he keeps his ear to the ground. So he'll have a question or two. He's just a wonderful owner.
And there are still people, and I'm not speaking out of school, but you hear this, that say, oh, well, he just bought that paper because he wants to be governor one day.
Right.
And what would you say to that?
Absolutely not. Yeah, and I asked him that question too, because he ran for mayor and for governor, and that's behind him. He said, I spent a lot of money, didn't win, and I feel like I can give back to the community in a different way by having the Advocate.
And what's in the cards for you 3 to 5 years down the line?
I would hope to be on a sunny beach. And I will probably be retired in about 5 years. So when I came on board, it just for me to help propel the business and to lean into the staff and to the organization. And this is the end of my career, and I can't think of a better ending.
Do you like Baton Rouge?
Oh, we love Baton Rouge. We love it. My son coming here, we got to see it through his eyes. We lived in Lafayette for almost 6 years, and what a great community. But now that we live in Baton Rouge, it's like we're like finding, we didn't even know this was here, because our college son at the time probably didn't know about it. So it's a very easy, comfortable place. My husband works for a company out of Atlanta, so he travels, and he's gone about 42 weeks out of the year, Monday to Thursday, Monday to Friday. And he loves coming home, and it's just an easy, friendly place to be.
Well, Judy Tersotis, this has been such an interesting discussion. The media today and what has been called the post-truth era is playing a more invaluable role than perhaps at any time in our history. And Baton Rouge is lucky to have you leading such an important institution in the community. So thanks so much for being here and sharing your stories and insights.
Thank you.
My guest today on Out to Lunch has been Judy Tersotis of The Advocate. You can find out more about The Advocate by going to the links on our website. It's batonrouge.la. You can find and subscribe to the Out to Lunch Baton Rouge podcast anywhere you get podcasts, and on our website, it's batonrouge.la. If you want to know what we all look like, you can find photos from this show on itsbatonrouge.la and on our Out to Lunch Baton Rouge social media. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsbatonrouge.la and WRKF 89.3 FM. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our associate producer is Peter Raschuti. Our Baton Rouge business consultants are Charlie D'Agostino, Dave Winwood, and Ann Edelman. And today's show was engineered by Colin Peden. I'm Stephanie Riegel. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the table here at Mansur's for more business Baton Rouge style on Out to Lunch.
Out to Lunch Baton Rouge is recorded live over lunch at Mansur's on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge. Mansur's is open for lunch daily 11 to 2, for dinner nightly, and for brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.